Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I'm going to be using my new rectangular moulds from Let's Resin along with several other Let's Resin products to show you that if you think outside of the box when using your silicone moulds, you can actually create some surprising things. And this week I did think outside of the box to create a box using my Let's Resin moulds and Let's Resin epoxy resin. If that sounds interesting, stay tuned and enjoy the video. So here are the moulds I received from Let's Resin. It's a set of 3 moulds and you also get wooden supports for each mould to make sure they keep their shape. Today I'm going to be using the middle size mould and the smallest mould because I thought if I put them together they would work well to make a box. So I'm going to be starting off with the larger mould of the 2 moulds I selected, which is actually the middle size mould from the set. And I've taken the housing which goes with that particular mould and I'm just putting it together and it just slots together so it's nice and easy and it keeps the shape of the mould really square or rectangular. So yeah, that works really well. Right then, so let's get some resin in the mould. I've got everything ready. I've got my Let's Resin levelling table to make sure my box is nice and level. And I've got my moulds and my resin. I'm going to be putting one mould inside the other one to create the cavity inside the box. And so I need to create a shallow layer of resin at the bottom of the mould to rest my inner mould on when it gets firm enough to rest the inner mould on. So I'm just making up a small amount of resin at the moment. I'm using the fast cure resin from Let's Resin. It's a 1:1 mixing ratio by volume. Fast cure resin is very thick and so it's hard to get rid of the bubbles with it, so it's best if you heat the bottles up in some warm water first, you know, just like a sink of warm water. Just pop it in there for 10 minutes and that does help, but still I found it was still a little bit bubbly, but once I added the pigment you couldn't tell, so I wasn't too worried. The pigment I'm using is an opaque black pigment from Resin Pro. It's the colour pigment. I was actually trying to use just Let's Resin products this week and I completely forgot that I actually do have some opaque pigments from Let's Resin and I've never even tried them yet. I just put them away and forgot about them, so I should have used Let's Resin's opaque black so I could kind of, you know, keep everything from the same supplier in one video. That would have been cool, but yeah, I forgot about that one. But yeah, it's worth checking out Let's Resin's opaque pigments. So once I'd finished mixing in my black pigment and I was happy with the opacity, it was time to add it to the mould. I only wanted about 1 centimetre in the bottom of the mould. I think I mixed up about 6 fluid ounces, something like that. And yeah, didn't need too much just to cover the bottom. Right, I wanted to leave that to cure for about 2 hours before adding the inner mould to create the cavity. I really didn't want it to sink down to the bottom, so I wanted the resin to set up just a little bit. So it was still tacky, but quite firm. And so I've got my inner mould now, and I'm just preparing it. I'm using some chameleon powder from Let's Resin. I've got some paper underneath to catch any excess in case there is any. And I'm going to brush it on the outside of the mould. Now that's something we don't normally do, isn't it? We normally just brush powders on the shiny surface on the inside of the mould. And this outside of the mould, well, it's matte, isn't it? And I really wasn't sure if this was going to work. But my motto is, if you don't try, you don't know, so just give it a bash. So here I've selected my 2 colours. I've got a teal and I think the other one is called grape. And yeah, I'm just brushing them on, and it did seem to be sticking quite well. The idea was to have colour on the inside of my box so it looked nice and pretty when you opened it and looked inside. So yeah, so far so good. So once I'd covered the mould in mica powder, it was time to add it onto that first layer of resin and hope that it was tacky enough to pick up the colour on the base of the mould. It was quite hard to get it into position without putting my head under the camera. Yeah, I wanted to make sure it was completely central, but I tried my best and it didn't seem far off at all. So next it was time to add resin to fill up all around the outside of that inner cavity mould. And I didn't want it to lose its shape, so I'm just filling it with some decorative stones that I found and hoped that that would, help to keep its shape, but also to keep it weighed down, just in case it hadn't stuck to, the first layer of resin. I didn't want it to float up when I added the next layer of resin. So yeah, this served two purposes really, to keep its shape and to stop it from floating up. So anyway, I'd mixed up some more epoxy resin. This time I'm using LouiseSmold Resins general purpose epoxy resin, which is actually my favourite one from them. And yeah, it's better really when you're not in a rush if you can use this resin, because it's a lot clearer. I was in a bit more of a rush with the first layer, but this was done at night, as you can probably tell by the bad lighting. So I didn't mind that it was going to take 8 to 10 hours to fully cure. So here I am just pouring it in until it reaches the top. And then I just used my kitchen torch on its very lowest, gentlest setting to pop any surface bubbles. You're okay using a torch as long as you don't hold it in the same position for too long, and if you've got it on a very low setting. Obviously, too much heat can damage your mould, and people, are always saying, oh, don't use torches. But honestly, if you've got one with a variable setting and you can just use it very quick, it's fine. Right, while I was waffling about torches, it cured. And it's time to take out the mould from the inside. So let's see what happened. Did it work? Didn't it work? I was curious to find out. Let's have a look. Okay, so it did work around the outer edges, and yeah, I thought that would be the case with the fresh resin going onto it. But where I'd laid it onto the tacky resin, it didn't quite work so well, but that really doesn't matter. Don't worry about it, we'll sort that out later on very easily. So for now, let's get the outer mould off. So it turned out nice. One or two imperfections, but I wasn't too worried. It was nice and shiny and I was happy with it. One or two bubbles also at the bottom, but who's going to see the bottom, eh? So as you can see, there's a ridge along the top, around the inside and around the outside. And what I did, and I thought I was filming, but I wasn't, was I filled up that channel that you get around the top with some more resin. This time I'm using some coating resin. It's the LouiseSmold Resins tabletop resin, and that's really strong and durable. I thought as soon as I had it, I would use the best resin for the job. And yeah, I'm sorry I forgot to film. And the other silly mistake I made was I should have added black pigment and it would have been such a nicer finish, but I didn't. And so you can see kind of the chameleon powders that had risen in the black resin, for the box. So you can see that through there. And also any other imperfections. So it would have been so much better if I'd have thought to add some black pigment. But anyway, now we've got a nice smooth top to the box, and it was nice and easy to do because it had those raised edges. Right, so now it's time to make the beautiful lid which will really give the box the wow factor. If you're a regular viewer to my channel, you will know that I've got a little bit of an obsession with seashell slices. I think they are the most beautiful thing to use, and yeah, I love them to bits. And as you can see, most of it is already done, but I'm showing you the last piece, which was one of the easiest pieces to do because the last two leaves were big, so it was a lot less fiddly. I'm using brass bezel wire, which I had left over from when I did my stained glass window project, which you might have seen. I've already cut it and got it kind of to the right shape. I'm just making sure it's the same as the other one because I was trying to make it symmetrical. And once I got it the same, I took a bulldog clip and just clipped it together so it stayed as I wanted it. Next, I took a piece of duct tape, just a bit bigger than the leaf, and placed the leaf onto the tape. And then once it was on the tape, I made sure it was nicely pressed down so that the UV resin, which I'm going to use next, couldn't leak out of it. I'm using Let's Resins UV resin, and I'm just going to put in enough to cover the base and to completely seal it. It's best not to pour UV resin too deeply because all sorts of strange things can start happening if it's too deep. And so yeah, work it in shallow layers. So there we are, it's just enough to cover the base. And then I just teased it to the edges with a micro brush before curing it for 2 minutes under Let's Resin's lovely UV lamp. After 2 minutes, when it was cured, I added some more UV resin, and this is what I'm going to put my seashell slices into. The seashell slices I'm using today are from Amazon, and they're really good. I've used them before quite a lot. But I was having a look on the internet to see where else I could get them from. And the first place I went to was one of my favourite places, Laura's Art Corner. And I had a look, and honestly, she has such a beautiful range of them that, you know how things kind of just jump into your basket? Well, all of a sudden, all of these beautiful seashell pieces that she has jumped into my basket. And yeah, so there's quite a lot on the way to my house as I speak. So yeah, these ones are from Amazon, but I've got some coming which you will see in a future video from Laura's Art Corner, and I can't wait to see those ones. Anyway, back to what I'm doing. I've selected some green ones and I'm just laying them on top of the UV resin, and it does take a while. And yeah, the whole thing took several hours to do, but it's worth it in the end for the finished result. I really love how it looks. So yeah, I just kept going until it was completely filled up with the green slices. When I was little, I was probably about 7, I think. My dad had to go away to Korea for work, and he was gone for about 4 weeks, I think, and we missed him so much. But anyway, when he came back from Korea, he brought a jewellery box for my mum, which was actually more of a little cupboard than a box, with a door and little drawers inside. And it was like black lacquered ebony with abalone inlay, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I've never forgotten that box. In fact, I think my mum's still got it. I'll have to have a look. But yeah, I used to just sneak into the bedroom and just open the drawers and look at the box and stroke it. And some things never change really, because I'm the same with these seashell slices. I just look through the box at all the different patterns and just stroke them. Is that sad? Was that too much information? I think it was. Anyway, yeah, that box that my dad brought back from Korea, oh my goodness, it was the most inspiring, beautiful thing that I never forgot. So yeah, it's nearly done. Let's get on to the next step. Once I'd finished adding all the slices, I cured it for 2 minutes under the lamp. Then I took the tape off and cured it from the back as well to make sure all the UV resin was cured. And here I am just trying it out in position and making sure it looks good. And now I need to attach it to the other piece, and at the base I'm using some black UV resin from Let's Resin. You don't have to use black, but I thought it would, if I had a big splodge of clear, it might kind of mess with the finished look, and I thought black would work better with the background. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. That was what was going round in my head. Not sure it was necessary. And there I'm just using some clear because that's fine there. And yeah, and then once that was on, I cured it under the UV lamp and it was done. Now the black did kind of leak through to the right side. I'm not worried about the wrong side, you're not going to see that. But this side is going to be facing the front. And so I took my Dremel with the sanding piece on and just got rid of that excess black UV resin that had come through to the front because I wanted it to be just right. Oh my goodness, I just need to interrupt the video for a moment. I do apologise, but I've just answered the door and look what arrived. And I've only just been talking about my delivery from Laura's Art Corner, haven't I? I wasn't expecting it today. Look at these pieces of shell. These are on a completely different level, aren't they? Wow, I wish I'd have had these a week ago. It would have made life so much easier having those large pieces. And these ones I'm just showing you now, these are sticky backed, so I could just cut them out to any shape I wanted and use those. Those would have made life so much more easy. Wow, these are amazing, and these will definitely be making an appearance again very, very soon. So not only did Laura send me these sheets of adhesive shell, she sent me these beautiful shell pieces. I love the blue ones. They just pop, don't they? They're gorgeous. And yeah, some coral coloured ones and some purples and greens. Got all sorts. I've also got some mica flakes there, those pearl ones, and these glitter shards, gold and pink. And the last little thing that I ordered was these little bubbles. And don't they look like bubbles? I think they're brilliant. So yeah, that was another gorgeous thing I ordered. Let's just focus. There we go. So I think those will also be making an appearance very soon. I'm sorry for the interruption, but I had to share my excitement. Now let's start making the lid. For this step, I'm using fast cure resin. Actually, in an ideal world, if I wasn't running short on time, I would have used Let's Resin's epoxy resin, the general purpose one that I used before, rather than the fast cure. I wanted it to be crystal clear on the front, and it's very cold here, so my fast cure resin was a little bit bubbly because it's such a thick resin, as I also mentioned before. But yeah, I was really running out of time. I needed to get this video done for you. And so yeah, I'm using fast cure resin, and I've just coated the front of my design because I didn't want to just place it on top of a layer of clear resin. I wanted it to be already coated so that it could get into all the nooks and crannies before turning it over and placing it onto the resin, which I'm just about to put in. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but yeah, I didn't want air pockets trapped in there. So I thought if I coated it first and let it soak in a bit while I was getting this part ready, then I could just flip it over and put it on, and it was less likely to have air pockets. And so I've just put in some resin. I wanted the thinnest layer I could possibly get. I didn't want it to be deep. So yeah, I'm going to move it around as much as I can to, get that mould covered without pouring too much on. So as you can see here, I'm just moving it around. And the fact that I've poured it so thinly as well, I can get rid of those air bubbles hopefully. So that was my plan anyway. And so yeah, there we go. I'm just pouring it into all the corners, and then with a few repeated applications of heat with my heat gun, I got rid of all those bubbles in the end. So I just kept, giving it a blast of heat, leaving it, and then another blast of heat and leaving it. Don't give it too much heat all at once. You might damage your mould, and you could also overheat your resin. So yeah, just do it gradually, and if you've got bubbly resin, you can get rid of the bubbles. So when I actually put the decorative piece in, my head was in the way most of the time, and even now you can't see what I'm doing very well. I kind of forgot about the camera, forgot about getting it all in frame because I was just carried away. But basically, I just put it on the top and got it central, and then I'm just cleaning the edges of the mould where I made a bit of a mess with some alcohol, isopropanol alcohol on a wet wipe, and yeah, there's my hair again. And so I wanted the sides to be as free from drips of resin as I could possibly get. Even though I'm going to be filling it up, I just thought, I want a nice smooth black finish. I don't want drips of clear in there. So that's why I was clearing up the edges. Hello, hair. Okay, so I did it again, twice in one video. I forgot to press record. Once that layer you've just seen was cured, I mixed up some more of the epoxy resin, mixed in some black and filled it up. Now, in an ideal world, I would have done it the same as I did the base with the second mould inside, so it was hollow. I wish I had, because, when I'd finished, the lid was too heavy really. But I just didn't have time to do it in 2 stages like I did with the base. So I had to just pour a solid lid, and honestly, it would have been so much better if it was hollow. But never mind, it worked and I could carry on. The next day, when this was cured, I could not wait to get it out of the mould. I really wanted to see how that design would look on the front, and I was really hoping that it would be flawless and that there would be no air pockets. So let's have a look, see how it turned out. I made the mistake of putting it down on the table before showing you, so there's a few little specks of dust and things on there, but look, isn't that beautiful? Very, very happy, and I was so happy that I didn't need to put a top layer on because I knew I didn't have time. This was just yesterday. I'm a bit late this week with my video, I've got to say. But this took a lot of time. It was worth it. I love it. I love that lid. Right, let's sort out the inside of the box before we move on. Earlier on I told you that it wasn't a problem and it was easy to rectify, and it really is. Let me show you how I do it. It was simply a case of pouring in some more UV resin, enough to cover the base. So I did a big puddle, then moved it around until it was all covered. And then I cured it for 2 minutes and then brushed on some of the chameleon powder that I used before, and it was as good as new. I wanted to kind of create the magic of my mum's jewellery box. So I thought that if I decorated the inside of the lid with some more of the seashell slices, then when you open the box, you've got a magical surprise as well. So it's not just beautiful on the outside, but on the inside too. And so, yeah, that was the plan next. I'm just drawing a border around because I just want a rectangle of the seashell slices on the inside. And as you can probably tell, I've already sanded it with a sanding block just to get rid of any sharp edges. So I've only filmed a small amount of the next part because you didn't really need to see it all. All I'm doing here is using a simple glue stick that you get for paper crafts, just adding it straight to the lid and then putting the seashell slices on top. I found lots of pieces with straight edges to go around the edge and then filled it all in. And the glue stick just keeps it in position enough for when I add the UV resin afterwards. And here it is, all filled in. I actually really enjoyed putting all those bits of shell on, finding just the right shape for each part. It was quite good fun. So once that was all stuck down and the glue was dry, I added a layer of UV resin just over the top. I brushed it on just to make sure that they were all stuck in place. And then once that was all, covered, and it didn't have to be neat because it was just a first covering, I cured it and then I did a full covering afterwards, covering the whole lot. Again, in an ideal world, I wouldn't have used UV resin. I would have used epoxy resin. It would have given a much better finish, but as I've said several times, I was in a rush. When I looked on Amazon to find some nice decorative hinges, I found this set with the corner pieces and the legs and a closure for the front along with the hinges, and I thought, ooh, that's fancy. But when I put them on, I thought, I'm not sure, they're too gold, too bright and garish, and I don't know, they might have looked good, but my instincts were saying to me, no, it's too much. So what I did was I got some black spray paint and I gave them all a light spray with the black paint outside, and it kind of gave them a aged antique look, and they looked much better in my opinion. The other problem was they were all different shades of gold as well. I actually decided in the end not to use those corner pieces on the lid. I preferred it without it, but I did use the legs and the hinges and everything else. So for the legs, I'm using a little bit of E6000 glue just to glue them into position so that then I can drill the holes and add the screws afterwards. In actual fact, later on I found out that I didn't need the glue. I really didn't. There was no point. I just drilled the holes and added the screws. But you learn as you go along, don't you? So I had a practice with the drill and screws off camera to see if it would work, and it did. I seem to have made a bit of a mess of the back, so I chose that side as the back because there were a few marks on it. Anyway, this drill is from Let's Resin as well. I've had it a long time. I don't even know if they still sell it, but it works well because it takes really small drill bits. I've got a Dremel, but you can only go so small with the bits, and it didn't hold the bit that I wanted it to hold. So I marked out where I wanted my hinges to go, held them in position, and then drilled some pilot holes through the holes in the hinge and added the screws, and it was as simple as that really, and that little drill actually worked really well. So I just did the central hole first, cleaned it up, added the screw, and then I could repeat the process for the other two screws. And I did the same thing for the closure on the front. And yeah, I was really happy with those pieces, and I was really glad I didn't put the corner pieces on. It was just too much. So I've spared you from having to watch me put everything on, and we have it finished. What do you think? I'm really happy with it. Thrilled, in fact. I just think it's turned out so beautifully, and it just goes to show that by using your silicone moulds in a slightly different way, you can make more than what you expect you can. So those moulds worked great for this. And it even looks beautiful on the inside. So as I said before, it would have been better if I'd made the lid hollow. It's really heavy and you can't, open it and leave it open. You've got to keep hold of it, otherwise it will fall over. So it wasn't a good idea of mine to do it solid like that. But next time, and there will be a next time because I love this, I will make sure I make the lid with a cavity on the inside as well. I also made a coaster with my leftover bits of resin along the way, and I think that goes really nice with it. I didn't show the making of that because it was very simple really, just a layer of black, then adding the shells and a layer of clear. I finished that off with a little bit of gold marker around the edges and added a tassel, and that was really beautiful next to the box. In fact, when you have them both together like that and you see the reflection in the box, it just shows how glossy that box actually is, doesn't it? Look at that reflection. Yeah, I think I've really managed to get that black lacquered ebony effect in this box, and I'm really happy. And I think those hinges and things look much better. Now I've made them look a bit more aged and less shiny. I like them better now. I've just realised there's something I forgot to mention before. The reason I made the lid so deep is because I was going to put those corner pieces on, and those corner pieces were 3 centimetres, and that's why the lid is so big. If I'd realised I wasn't going to use them, I could have done it half the size, couldn't I? Just deep enough for the hinges and that closure on the front. But anyway, I still like the finished result. And yeah, let's have a look at some photos. Yeah, I think it looks really, really pretty. It's in my dining room at the moment. So anyway, this is the longest video I've made for ages, and you can see why, because there was a lot to do, wasn't there? But it was worth it. I loved the whole process, and I hope you did too. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.